If you are driving on UK roads today, there is something you absolutely need to know before you turn that ignition key, before you pull out of your driveway, and before you make a single journey. A new road law has come into effect starting today, and thousands of drivers across the United Kingdom are completely unaware of what it means for them, what it could cost them, and how it could change the way they drive forever. This is not a minor update buried in some government document that nobody reads. This is a significant shift in road legislation that affects every single person who gets behind the wheel, whether you have been driving for 6 months or 60 years. The UK has always been at the forefront of road safety legislation, and this latest update continues that tradition, but with much sharper teeth than anything we have seen in recent years. Authorities have made it very clear that there will be no grace period, no warnings for first-time offenders caught in violation, and no leniency simply because you did not know the law had changed. Ignorance of the law has never been a valid defense in a British court, and it certainly is not one now. So the responsibility falls entirely on you, the driver, to understand what has changed and to adapt your behavior on the road accordingly. Let us start with what is perhaps the most talked about element of this new legislation, and that is the expansion of mobile phone laws behind the wheel. You might think you already know everything about using your phone while driving. You might believe that because you only hold it at a red light, or only glance at it for a second, or only use it while parked with the engine running, that you are somehow in the clear. Under the new law, that is no longer the case. The rules have been significantly tightened, and the definition of what counts as illegal phone use has been broadened in a way that catches out even the most careful and conscientious drivers. Previously, the law focused primarily on handheld use while the vehicle was in motion. There were loopholes that clever solicitors could exploit, and there were grey areas that made prosecutions difficult. Those grey areas have now been closed. Under the new rules, you cannot use a handheld device for virtually any reason while you are in your vehicle and the engine is running. That includes checking notifications, scrolling through music, using the camera, reading a map without it being properly mounted, or doing anything at all that requires you to hold or interact with the device in your hand. The penalty for being caught is a fixed penalty notice of £200 and 6 points on your license. For new drivers who have held their license for less than 2 years, 6 points means an automatic revocation of that license, and they must reapply and restart the entire process from scratch. But the phone law is only one part of what has changed today. There is also a major update to the rules surrounding lane discipline on motorways and dual carriageways. Middle lane hogging has long been a frustration for drivers across the country, and while it has technically been an offence for years, enforcement has been inconsistent and penalties have rarely been handed out with any regularity. That changes now. Officers have been given clearer guidance and stronger authority to issue fixed penalty notices to drivers who sit in the middle lane without a valid reason to be there. The fine is £100 and 3 penalty points, and it can be issued by a camera as well as by a police officer on patrol. This matters more than many people realise, because middle lane hogging does not just irritate the drivers stuck behind you. It actively creates dangerous situations. It forces faster-moving traffic to undertake on the left, which is itself illegal. It creates unnecessary congestion in the outer lane. It disrupts the natural flow of motorway driving and increases the risk of collisions. The new enforcement approach is designed to address all of that, and drivers who have spent years treating the middle lane like their personal cruise lane need to adjust their habits immediately. There is also an important update when it comes to the rules around electric vehicles and how they interact with the rest of traffic. As the number of electric vehicles on UK roads continues to climb dramatically, the government has introduced new guidance and in some cases binding rules around EV charging etiquette and road use. Drivers of electric vehicles are now required to follow specific protocols when using public charging points located on or adjacent to public roads. Blocking a charging bay when your vehicle is fully charged, or leaving your vehicle plugged in beyond the point of full charge in a way that prevents other EV drivers from accessing the facility, can now result in a fixed penalty notice being issued by local authorities. This is a relatively new area of enforcement, and it reflects how quickly the landscape of UK driving is changing as we transition away from petrol and diesel. Another significant change involves the rules around what drivers must do when approaching emergency vehicles. The existing legislation already required drivers to give way to emergency vehicles with lights and sirens activated, but the new rules extend this to cover a wider range of scenarios. Drivers must now show greater awareness and take more proactive steps to create space, including in situations where the emergency vehicle is stationary at the side of the road. Failure to slow down and move over when passing a stationary emergency vehicle, police car, or highways maintenance vehicle with its lights activated is now a much more serious offense than it was before, with increased fines and the possibility of points on your license. Speed awareness, too, has seen a meaningful update. While the national speed limits themselves have not changed in this round of legislation, the way in which speed is monitored and enforced in certain zones has been upgraded significantly. New average speed camera systems have been deployed in an extended range of locations, including residential areas, school zones, and stretches of road near hospitals and care homes. These cameras measure your average speed between two fixed points rather than your speed at a single moment, which means you cannot simply slow down as you approach a camera and then accelerate again. The system sees everything across the entire stretch of road, and if your average speed exceeds the limit, a penalty notice follows automatically. There is no discretion, no human review, and no opportunity to make an argument that you were only slightly over for a brief moment. For drivers of larger vehicles, including vans and light goods vehicles, there are additional changes to be aware of regarding load security. The law has always required that loads be properly secured before a vehicle moves, but the new rules introduce specific standards for different categories of load and different types of vehicle. Roadside checks have been increased as part of a wider campaign targeting unsafe loads, and the fines for failing to meet the required standards have increased substantially. A poorly secured load that becomes a hazard on the road can now result in a fine of up to £5,000, and in cases where an unsecured load causes injury to another road user, criminal prosecution becomes a very real possibility. Let us also address something that affects almost every driver at some point, and that is the rules around driving in adverse weather conditions. The UK is notorious for sudden changes in weather, and the new legislation includes updated guidance on the minimum standards of visibility and vehicle preparedness required before you set off. Driving with a windscreen that is not fully clear, or with windows that are only partially defrosted, has always been technically illegal, but enforcement has now been strengthened. Officers carrying out roadside checks can now issue a penalty notice specifically for setting off in a vehicle that does not meet visibility standards, even if no accident has occurred and no danger was created in the moment. The principle is simple: if your vehicle is not safe to drive before you leave, you should not be driving it. Cyclists and pedestrians have also been given greater protections under the updated highway code rules that form part of this legislative package. The hierarchy of road users places vulnerable road users at the top of the chain of responsibility, meaning that drivers must take the greatest care to protect those most at risk. Failing to give adequate space when overtaking a cyclist, failing to yield to a pedestrian who has stepped onto a crossing, or driving in a way that causes unnecessary risk to a vulnerable road user can all now result in penalties that were not available to enforcement officers under the previous framework. What all of this adds up to is a fundamental statement from the UK government and from road safety authorities that the standard of driving on British roads needs to improve, and that the responsibility for making that improvement lies with drivers themselves. The roads are becoming more complex, with more types of vehicles, more vulnerable users, and more competing demands on limited space. The law is evolving to meet that complexity, and every driver who gets behind the wheel today needs to be fully aware of what the rules now require. There is no excuse for not knowing. The information is available. The resources are out there. And if you are watching this right now, you are already ahead of thousands of other drivers who will get into their cars today with no idea that anything has changed. Use that advantage. Share this with other drivers you know. Talk about it with family members who drive, with colleagues, with friends. The more drivers who are aware of what the law now requires, the safer every road in the UK becomes for all of us. The bottom line is this: drive with full attention. Keep your phone out of your hand completely. Stay in the correct lane. Give space to emergency vehicles. Secure your loads properly. Make sure your vehicle is safe before you move. Respect cyclists and pedestrians. And be aware that the cameras and the officers enforcing these rules are more active, more equipped, and more empowered than they have ever been before. The days of getting away with borderline behavior on UK roads are coming to an end, and the new law starting today is a very clear signal of that direction. Stay legal, stay safe, and stay informed. And please subscribe to my channel and hit that notification bell so you never miss an update like this one. My channel is your go-to source for everything you need to know about UK driving laws, road safety news, and advice that keeps you on the right side of the law every single time you get behind the wheel. Subscribe to my channel today and join a community of drivers who take their responsibility on the road seriously.